Some silences are deafening. In the Ashworth mansion, the one clinging to Liam wasn't just loud, it was actively erasing him. I was just the maid, a silent witness to the Davies' perfect life. Until I discovered one of their beautiful twins was slowly starving, and the other was the monster orchestrating it. The Davies' house always smelled of lemon polish and unspoken resentment. I should know. I was the one who scrubbed the floors and pretended not to hear the clipped, icy arguments that echoed through the marble hallways after the children were in bed. For 5 years, I was their maid, their nanny, their silent witness. To the outside world, they were the perfect family. Richard with his tailored suits and booming laugh, Eleanor with her pristine designer outfits and charity luncheons, and of course the twins, Leo and Liam. From the moment they were born, they were cast in their roles. Leo was the heir. He had his father's confident smile and his mother's striking blue eyes. He was robust, loud, and utterly charming. He was the sun around which the Davies universe revolved. And Liam was his shadow. He was born smaller, quieter, with wide, watchful brown eyes that seemed to hold the worries of a much older soul. Eleanor would dress them in identical outfits, but it only ever highlighted their differences. On Leo, the clothes looked crisp and perfect. On Liam, they always seemed a size too big, as if he were shrinking inside them. The problem started subtly. A few bites of mashed carrots pushed around a plate, a sippy cup of milk left untouched. I'd try to coax him, making airplane noises with the spoon like I did with my own grandchildren. "Just one more for Maria, sweet boy," I'd plead softly. Sometimes he'd oblige with a weak, watery smile, but Mrs. Davies, Eleanor, had no patience for it. "Don't coddle him, Maria," she'd snap from across the vast dining table, her eyes fixed on her phone. "He's seeking attention. If he's hungry, he will eat." But he didn't. Days turned into a week, then 2. Leo would devour his meals, smearing chocolate pudding on his cheeks with glee, while Liam's plate remained a pristine landscape of untouched food. The change in him was terrifying. The already small boy began to look fragile, like a porcelain doll. Dark circles bloomed under his eyes. His skin took on a pale, almost translucent quality. He stopped running in the garden with his brother, preferring to sit on the steps. His little shoulders hunched, watching. My concern grew into a knot of pure fear in my stomach. I tried to talk to Eleanor again, this time more firmly. I found her in her dressing room surrounded by silk and cashmere, planning her outfit for some gala. "Mrs. Davies," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm very worried about Liam. He hasn't eaten a proper meal in over 2 weeks. He's losing weight. I think we should take him to a doctor." She didn't even look at me, just held a diamond necklace up to her throat, admiring her reflection. "Maria, you are overstepping. He's a fussy eater. All children go through it. Leo went through a phase where he would only eat bananas. It passed. This will too. You're being dramatic." "But he's not just fussy," I insisted, my voice rising. "He looks ill. He seems frightened of the food." That got her attention. She finally turned, her perfectly painted lips thinning into a hard line. "Frightened? Don't be ridiculous. He's a perfectly healthy boy who is trying to manipulate us with his theatrics. Do not indulge it. It is not your place." The dismissal was as cold and sharp as a shard of glass. I was just the help. My opinion, my years of raising children and grandchildren, meant nothing. That night, I knew I couldn't let it go. Richard and Eleanor were out at their gala, leaving me in charge. Leo was fast asleep, his little chest rising and falling rhythmically. But Liam's room was silent. Too silent. I finished cleaning the kitchen, my mind racing. What was I missing? Why would a child, a perfectly healthy child, starve himself? It didn't make any sense. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, each tick sounding like a countdown. Around 11 p.m. I was doing a final check, turning off lights, when I passed the twins' playroom. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open to close it properly when I heard it. A faint sound. It wasn't a cry, not exactly. It was a soft rhythmic whisper coming from the nursery they shared, down the hall. My heart started to pound. Both boys should have been sound asleep for hours. Tiptoeing down the hall, I pushed their bedroom door open a crack. The only light was from a small, moon-shaped nightlight, casting long, eerie shadows on the wall. Leo was asleep in his crib on the left, snoring softly. I looked over at Liam's crib on the right. He wasn't in it. My blood ran cold. I scanned the room, my eyes darting into the shadows, and then I saw him. He was huddled in the corner, his back to me, and he wasn't alone. Hovering over him was the silhouette of his brother, Leo. The whispering was coming from Leo. I couldn't make out the words at first, just the low, insistent hiss. I crept closer, holding my breath, until I could finally hear what he was saying, and the words that reached my ears made my entire body freeze in horror. My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a scream, and the perfectly curated world of the Davies family shattered right before my eyes. "The food is poison, Liam." Leo's voice was a venomous whisper, a sound no 3-year-old should be able to make. It was smooth, confident, and utterly chilling. "Mommy made it for you. It will make your tummy hurt until you die. They'll put you in a box and bury you in the dirt. But my food is special. It's safe. Only I can eat." He leaned closer, his shadow engulfing his smaller brother. "If you tell, the monster under the bed will eat you. I'll tell him to. So you have to be quiet. You have to be good. And you must never, ever eat." My mind struggled to comprehend it. This wasn't a childish game. This was systematic torture. Leo, the golden child, the charming, perfect son, was methodically and deliberately starving his own twin brother. The attention-seeking, the fussiness, it was all a lie, a carefully constructed narrative by a child who, for reasons I couldn't fathom, wanted his brother to simply waste away. My legs felt weak, and I leaned against the doorframe for support, the polished wood cold against my cheek. I had to do something. Taking a deep, silent breath, I pushed the door open fully. The sudden change in light made both boys jump. Liam scrambled back, a whimper escaping his lips, his wide, terrified eyes finding mine. Leo, however, transformed in an instant. The sinister hiss was gone, replaced by a bright, innocent smile. "Maria," he chirped, as if he'd been caught playing with his teddy bear. Liam had a bad dream. I was telling him a story. My eyes locked onto his. "Is that right, Leo?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. I walked over and knelt beside Liam, gently pulling him into my arms. He was shaking, his tiny body nothing but sharp angles and fragile bones under his pajamas. He clung to me, burying his face in my shoulder, his small hands gripping my uniform like a lifeline. I looked back at Leo, who was watching us, his head tilted, that placid smile never leaving his face. There was no flicker of guilt in his eyes, only a cold, unnerving curiosity. The next morning the pretense was suffocating. At breakfast, Eleanor placed 2 identical bowls of oatmeal in front of the boys. Leo dug in with gusto. Liam stared at his bowl as if it contained a live snake. He pushed it away, his lip trembling. "See?" Eleanor said to me with an exasperated sigh, not even looking up from her tablet. Theatrics. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her and tell her to open her eyes, to see the monster she was raising, and the victim she was ignoring. But I knew it was useless. My word against her perfect sons. I would be out on the street before I could even finish my sentence. So I played their game. I cleared the untouched bowl without a word, but a plan was forming in my mind, a desperate, risky plan. I couldn't fight this battle in the open. I had to go underground. That night, I waited. I waited until the grand house was deep in slumber, until the sounds of the city outside had faded to a distant hum. I crept into the kitchen, the cold tiles chilling my bare feet. I didn't dare turn on a light. Working by the glow of the oven clock, I warmed some milk and mixed in a little honey and a spoonful of rice cereal, making a thin, sweet porridge that was easy to swallow. My heart hammered against my ribs with every clink of the spoon. Carrying the small bowl and a baby spoon, I moved like a ghost back up the stairs. The twins' room was silent. I stood by the door, listening for a full minute before daring to enter. Inside, the moon-shaped nightlight cast its familiar soft glow. I went straight to Liam's crib. He wasn't asleep. His eyes were wide open, two dark pools in the dim light, tracking my every move. I put a finger to my lips and leaned in close. "Shh, my sweet boy," I whispered, my voice barely a breath. "I have something for you. It's not from Mommy. It's from Maria. It's magic food. It's safe." He stared at the bowl, then back at me, his little brow furrowed with a fear so profound it broke my heart. I dipped the spoon in and brought it to his lips. He flinched, turning his head away. "No," he breathed, the word a tiny puff of air. "Poison." My throat tightened. "No, little one. Not poison. It's strength. It's love. Just one bite. For me." I held the spoon steady, my hand trembling. He watched my face for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, hesitantly, he opened his mouth and accepted the smallest taste. He swallowed. His eyes widened slightly, not in pain, but in surprise. I offered another spoonful, and he took it, and another. We fell into a silent, secret rhythm, a conspiracy of two in the dead of night. Spoonful by spoonful, I was feeding hope back into this forgotten child. A tear of pure relief rolled down my cheek and splashed onto his little hand. He was eating. He was going to be okay. I felt a surge of triumph, a belief that I could fix this, that I could save him. I was so focused on him, so lost in the moment, that I didn't hear the rustle of blankets from the other side of the room. It was only when I went to offer the last spoonful of porridge that a chill ran down my spine, a primal sense of being watched. I slowly lifted my head and looked towards the other crib, and my blood turned to ice. Across the room, Leo was sitting bolt upright. He wasn't crying or calling out. He was just watching us, his face a pale circle in the darkness, and in the faint glow of the nightlight, I could see his eyes, wide and unblinking, fixed on me with an expression of pure, chilling fury. The silence in the room was a living thing, thick and suffocating. My breath hitched in my chest. Leo's eyes, those brilliant blue eyes that everyone raved about, were like chips of ice. There was no childish sleepiness in them, no confusion. There was only a calculated adult-like rage that had no place on the face of a 3-year-old. He didn't say a word. He just stared, his small hands gripping the bars of his crib, so tightly his knuckles were white. Liam, sensing the shift, started to tremble in my arms again. Slowly, deliberately, I lowered the now empty bowl to the floor. I couldn't show fear. He would feed on it. I had to be the adult, the one in control. Even if my insides were churning with a terror I had never known, I gently settled Liam back into his crib, pulling his blanket up to his chin. "Sleep now, sweet boy," I whispered, my voice miraculously steady. I brushed a kiss on his forehead before turning to face his brother. I walked over to Leo's crib, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I stood there, looking down at him. He looked up at me, his perfect angelic face a mask of cold fury. "You're a bad lady," he finally said, his voice low and flat. "You gave him the poison food." "That wasn't poison, Leo," I said softly, keeping my voice level. "That was good food to make him strong. Brothers are supposed to help each other be strong." A flicker of something annoyance, contempt, crossed his face. "He's not my brother," he hissed, the venom returning. "He's a crybaby. Mommy says so. Daddy says so. He's weak." He pointed a small accusatory finger at me. "I'm going to tell Mommy you came in our room. She'll be mad. She'll send you away forever. And then there will be no one to give him the poison." The threat hung in the air, simple, childish, and utterly terrifying in its implications. He knew exactly what strings to pull. My job, my livelihood. I needed this job. But looking from his cold, defiant face to Liam's frail, sleeping form, I knew I couldn't back down. "Good night, Leo," I said, my voice firm. I turned and walked out of the room, not looking back, my body rigid, waiting for the scream, the cry for Mommy that would seal my fate. But it never came. There was only silence. The next few days were a quiet, nerve-shredding war. The secret feedings continued, but now they were exercises in pure stealth. I would wait until I was absolutely certain Leo was in a deep sleep, sometimes standing outside their door for half an hour, just listening to their breathing patterns. Every floorboard creaked like a gunshot. Every shadow seemed to hold a small, watching figure. During the day, Leo was a model of perfection. He was charming to his parents, sweet to his nanny, but with me there was a new dynamic. When his parents weren't looking, he would fix me with that cold, knowing stare. He'd walk past me and brush against my leg, a tiny act of intimidation. He was reminding me that he knew my secret, that my fate was in his hands. And I saw signs of my late-night efforts paying off. A little bit of color returned to Liam's cheeks. He had a bit more energy, even managing a small, genuine smile when I blew bubbles for him in the garden. It was just enough to keep me going, to make me believe this insane risk was worth it. But I knew Leo saw it too, and I knew he wouldn't stand for it. The trap was sprung on a Thursday. Eleanor was preparing for yet another charity auction. I was in her dressing room, dusting the antique vanity while she clasped a string of pearls around her neck. "Have you seen my sapphire earrings, Maria?" she asked, rummaging through a velvet-lined jewelry box. "The ones Richard got me for our anniversary? The little teardrop ones?" "I haven't, Mrs. Davies," I said honestly. "I can help you look." We searched for 10 minutes, but they were nowhere to be found. Eleanor was visibly irritated, but eventually chose another pair and rushed out of the house, calling over her shoulder, "If you find them, put them in my safe immediately." Later that afternoon, Leo did something unusual. He sought me out in the kitchen while I was polishing silver. He came up to me and wrapped his little arms around my legs in a hug. I froze, completely taken aback. It was the first time he had shown me any affection in weeks. "Thank you for my snack, Maria," he said, his voice muffled against my apron. I had given him apple slices not 10 minutes earlier. "You're welcome, Leo," I said, cautiously patting his head. He pulled away, gave me one of his brilliant camera-ready smiles, and ran off to the playroom. For a foolish moment, my heart lifted. Maybe I had gotten through to him. Maybe he was just a confused little boy after all. The storm broke 2 hours later. Eleanor returned, her mood even fouler than when she left. "The earring is still missing," she announced, storming into the kitchen. "I've looked everywhere. It's not in my car, not in my purse, it's just vanished." She began pacing, her heels clicking angrily on the stone floor. "That set was worth a fortune. Richard is going to be furious." Just then, Leo ran in. "Mommy, Mommy!" he cried, his face a perfect picture of distress. "Maria was in your room again. I saw her." Eleanor stopped pacing and turned to me, her eyes narrowing. "Is that true, Maria?" "Yes, Mrs. Davies," I said calmly. "I was cleaning in there this morning, as I always do." "Did you see my earring?" "No, ma'am, I told you that." Leo tugged on his mother's dress. "She's a bad lady, Mommy. She took my teddy bear yesterday and hid him." It was a lie, a blatant, ridiculous lie, but it was a seed of doubt planted in Eleanor's already agitated mind. "Don't be silly, Leo," Eleanor snapped. But she was looking at me. "Maria, empty your pockets." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. It was happening. This was his plan. "Mrs. Davies, I would never—" "Empty them," she commanded, her voice like steel. My hands were shaking as I pulled the contents from my apron, a dust cloth, a small tube of hand cream, a tissue. Nothing. I felt a wave of relief. He had failed. But then her eyes moved to the coat hanging on the hook by the back door. "That one too," she said. My heart plummeted. My old wool coat. I wore it to and from the bus stop every day. I walked over, my legs feeling like lead, and began to empty the pockets. A bus pass, a stray coin, a crumpled grocery list. My fingers brushed against something small, hard, and cold in the bottom of the right pocket. I knew with a sickening certainty what it was. Before I could even react, Eleanor strode over, thrust her own hand into the pocket, and pulled it out. Lying in her palm, glittering malevolently under the kitchen lights, was the missing sapphire earring. Eleanor gasped, her face a mask of shock and betrayal. And over her shoulder I saw Leo, standing in the doorway, a look of perfect, serene triumph on his angelic face. "I knew it," Eleanor whispered, her voice a mixture of horror and vindication. After all these years. In my own home. She held the earring up as if it were a murder weapon, her eyes blazing with a cold fury. My own voice was gone, trapped in my throat by a knot of disbelief and terror. I looked from her face to Leo's. He was a perfect statue of innocence, his blue eyes wide, a slight quiver on his lip as if he were about to cry. He had played this perfectly. "Mrs. Davies, I swear to you, I have no idea how that got there," I finally managed, the words sounding weak and pathetic even to my own ears. "I did not take your earring." "Oh, spare me the act, Maria," she spat, her face contorting with disgust. "It's in your coat. Who else could it have been? Get your things. I want you out of this house in 5 minutes. Consider yourself lucky I'm not calling the police." Tears of helpless rage and despair welled in my eyes. 5 years of loyal service, of loving her children like they were my own, erased by a lie from a manipulative 3-year-old. I looked at Leo one last time, and through my blurry vision, I saw him take a tiny, almost imperceptible step back, hiding himself slightly behind his mother's leg. He was watching my defeat, savoring it. And in that moment something inside me snapped. The fear was replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated resolve. I wasn't going to let him win. I wasn't going to leave Liam behind. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it cut through the tense air in the kitchen. Eleanor stared at me, aghast. "What did you just say to me?" I said no," I repeated, my voice stronger now. I took a step forward, my eyes locked on hers. "You can fire me, you can call the police, but I'm not leaving this house until you and your husband come with me to the nursery and see the truth." "The truth?" "The truth is that you're a common thief." "The truth," I said, my voice rising with passion, "is that your son is starving to death, and your other son is the one doing it." The accusation was so outlandish, so monstrous, that it stunned her into silence. Before she could recover, the back door opened and Richard Davies walked in, home early from the office. He took one look at his wife's face, at my tear-streaked one, at the earring in Eleanor's hand, and his jovial expression hardened. "What in God's name is going on here?" Eleanor quickly recounted the story, painting me as a deceitful, ungrateful thief. I let her finish, my gaze never wavering. When she was done, Richard turned to me, his face a thundercloud. "Is this true, Maria?" "The earring was in my coat, Mr. Davies," I said, choosing my words carefully. "But I did not put it there, and it is not the real problem in this house. Please, I am begging you, before you throw me out, just give me 2 minutes. Let me show you something. For Liam's sake." Something in my desperate plea must have broken through his anger. He hesitated, looking from me to his wife, then to Leo, who was now clinging to his mother's leg. "All right, Maria," he said, his voice heavy. 2 minutes. Show us." I led the way upstairs, a silent, grim procession. Richard, Eleanor, and a suddenly very quiet Leo followed. I pushed open the door to the twins' room. Liam was in his crib, awake but listless, his thumb in his mouth. He looked so small, so breakable. I walked over to the small dresser between the cribs and pulled open the bottom drawer, the one filled with spare blankets and pajamas. "I found this yesterday when I was putting away the laundry," I said, my voice shaking as I reached into the back of the drawer. My fingers closed around it. I pulled it out and turned around. It was a small plastic lunchbox, one with a cartoon rocket ship on it. I opened the lid. Inside, nestled amongst the blankets, was a rotting collection of Liam's uneaten meals. A shriveled piece of chicken, moldy sandwich crusts, a congealed mass of oatmeal. The smell that wafted out was foul and sickening. Eleanor gasped and put a hand over her mouth. "Leo has been telling Liam that the food is poison," I said, my voice clear and steady, looking directly at Richard. "He's been threatening him. At night when you're asleep, Liam is terrified. Leo takes his food when I'm not looking and hides it in here. He's been systematically starving his brother for weeks." Richard stared at the box, then at Liam's frail form in the crib, and a dawning horror spread across his features. The pieces were finally clicking into place. He turned slowly to his golden child. "Leo," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Is this true?" Leo's composure finally crumbled. His face, stripped of its confident mask, looked pale and pinched. He burst into tears. Real, terrified tears this time. "Liam's bad," he wailed, pointing a trembling finger at his twin. "He cries all the time. You and Mommy only love him. You always say poor Liam, poor little Liam. You love him more. I wanted him to go away." The confession, so raw and childish in its jealousy, hung in the air, more damning than any other evidence. The weak twin wasn't Liam. The weak one was Leo, poisoned by an envy so deep it had turned him into a monster. Eleanor looked as if she'd been struck, her face ashen. All this time she had seen a manipulator, when in reality she was looking at a terrified victim. That was the last day I worked for the Davies family. But it wasn't the end. They didn't call the police. The next day, Richard called me. His voice was humbled, broken. He apologized profusely and offered me a severance package so generous it made me cry. More importantly, he told me they had taken Liam to the hospital, where he was being treated for severe malnutrition. They had also found a family therapist, someone to help them navigate the dark, tangled emotions that had taken root in their home. A few months later, I received a letter in the mail. It was a card, handmade with construction paper. On the front was a crayon drawing of two stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. They were both the same size. Inside, in a child's wobbly printing, it said, "Thank you, Maria." Below it, in Eleanor's elegant script, was a simple note. "You saved us all. He's eating now. He's laughing. Thank you." I folded the card and placed it on my mantelpiece, a reminder that sometimes the quietest voices are the ones that need to be heard the most, and that even in the darkest of houses, a single act of courage can be enough to let the light in. The silence in the Ashworth mansion was a special kind of loud. It was the heavy, oppressive silence of polished marble floors that reflected everything but warmth, and of soaring ceilings that seemed to swallow sound whole. I'd been the housekeeper for the Ashworths for 5 years, and in that time I'd learned to read the silences. There was the tense silence of a marital spat, the smug silence of a successful business deal, and the brittle, fragile silence that always surrounded their youngest son, Liam. He and his twin brother Leo were 13, but they were worlds apart. Leo was the sun-bright, athletic, and effortlessly charming. He was the son Mr. Ashworth bragged about at the country club, the one whose trophies gleamed in the dedicated glass cabinet in the study. Liam, however, was the shadow. He was quiet, artistic, and born with a fragility that Mrs. Ashworth seemed to view as a personal failing. He was smaller, paler, and always seemed to be braced for a criticism that was sure to come. He was, in his parents' unspoken words, the weaker twin. The problem started subtly. A few months ago, I noticed Liam's dinner plates were coming back to the kitchen almost untouched. I was the one who cooked for the family, and I took pride in my food. I tried making his favorites, creamy macaroni and cheese, crispy chicken tenders, even the chocolate lava cakes he used to adore. Nothing worked. The food would be pushed around, a single bite taken from a corner, but the plate was essentially full. At first I didn't think much of it, a teenage phase perhaps. But then I saw the changes in him. The already pale skin became almost translucent, stretched taut over his cheekbones. Dark circles, like bruises, bloomed under his large, sad eyes. His school uniform, which used to fit him perfectly, began to hang off his shrinking frame. He moved through the cavernous house like a ghost, his footsteps making no sound on the plush runners. I tried to bring it up with Mrs. Ashworth. I found her in the sunroom, arranging a bouquet of sterile white lilies. "Ma'am," I began, wringing my apron in my hands, "I'm a bit concerned about Liam. He's not really eating anything I make." She didn't look up from her flowers. "He's a picky eater, Clara. Always has been. He's probably just seeking attention now that Leo is getting so much praise for his football season." She snipped the stem of a lily with a sharp, final sound. "He'll eat when he's hungry. Don't coddle him." Her dismissal felt like a slap. I wasn't coddling him. I was worried. The boy was wasting away before our very eyes. The dinner table became a nightly theater of cruelty. Mr. Ashworth would boom, "Look at that, Leo. Cleaned your plate. That's my boy. Building strength." Then his eyes would slide to Liam's plate, piled high with food, and his face would harden. And you, Liam, still picking at your food like a bird. How do you expect to ever amount to anything if you can't even handle a piece of steak? Liam would just shrink further into his chair, his eyes fixed on his plate, his fork frozen in his hand. He wouldn't cry or argue. He would just disappear. Leo, for his part, would sometimes cast a quick, unreadable glance at his brother before launching into a story about his day, successfully drawing his parents' attention back to him. The shining star. My worry began to curdle into a cold dread. This wasn't a phase. Something was terribly wrong. I started leaving snacks in his room, a protein bar on his desk, a glass of milk by his bed, hoping he might eat when no one was watching. But they remained untouched. Monuments to my failure. Mrs. Ashworth found a granola bar I'd left on his nightstand and reprimanded me sharply. I told you not to coddle him, Clara. You are the help. Your job is to clean this house and cook the meals, not to practice amateur psychology on my son. The words stung, but the fear for Liam was worse. His light was dimming, and I felt like I was the only one who noticed. I started staying up later, unable to sleep, my mind racing with possibilities. Was he sick? Was something happening at school? He was so withdrawn it was impossible to ask him. He'd just give me a watery, fleeting smile and whisper, "I'm fine, Clara," before vanishing into his room. One Thursday night, the dread became unbearable. Liam had looked particularly unwell at dinner, his head lolling slightly as his father lectured him about his posture. He'd been sent to his room without supper as punishment for not even trying his green beans. I felt sick. Around midnight, long after the house had settled into its usual heavy silence, I was doing a final wipe down of the kitchen counters when I heard it, a faint scraping sound. It was coming from the direction of the pantry, near the large rubbish bin. My first thought was a mouse. I grabbed a broom and crept forward, my heart thumping. The sound was furtive, secretive. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. It was deliberate. As I rounded the corner of the large kitchen island, my breath caught in my throat. The bin lid was propped open, and a small, shadowy figure was leaning over it. My heart stopped. It wasn't Mr. or Mrs. Ashworth. It wasn't Liam. It was Leo, the golden child, the perfect son. And in his hands was Liam's dinner plate from earlier, which he was systematically, silently, scraping clean into the bin. The clatter of the porcelain against the side of the plastic bin was deafening in the stillness. Leo froze for a fraction of a second, a piece of roasted potato halfway off the fork. He didn't jump or look guilty. He simply straightened up slowly, placed the plate on the counter with a soft click, and turned to face me. His expression wasn't one of a child caught misbehaving. It was calm, measured, and unnervingly adult. "Clara," he said, his voice a low, even whisper. "You're up late." My own voice was stuck somewhere in my chest. I finally managed to push it out. "Leo, what are you doing? That's Liam's dinner." He glanced at the plate, then back at me, a calculated look of concern dawning on his face. He was a phenomenal actor. "I know," he sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled blonde hair. "Look, you can't tell Dad. Please." He took a step closer, adopting a conspiratorial tone. "If Dad sees that Liam hasn't eaten again, he'll take away his drawing tablet for a month. You know how much he loves that thing. It's the only thing that makes him happy." He made it sound so reasonable, so noble. He was protecting his weaker brother from their father's wrath. It was the perfect explanation, the kind of story that would make the Ashworths praise him for his maturity if they ever found out. But standing there in the cold blue light of the kitchen's under-cabinet LEDs, I didn't believe a word of it. It wasn't just the coldness in his eyes that I'd glimpsed before he'd put on his mask of concern. It was the methodical way he'd been scraping the plate. There was no frustration in it, no sadness for his brother. It was a chore, a task he performed with detached efficiency. "I'm just trying to help him," Leo insisted, his voice soft and persuasive. "He gets so anxious at dinner. Sometimes it's easier if it just disappears. Less trouble for everyone." "Why doesn't he eat, Leo?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Leo shrugged, his face a perfect picture of brotherly frustration. "Who knows? He's Liam. He's always been different. Attention, I guess. Don't worry, Clara. I've got it handled. This is just a twin thing. He gave me a reassuring smile that didn't reach his eyes, then picked up the plate, rinsed it under the tap, and slotted it neatly into the dishwasher. Our secret, okay? I just nodded, my mind reeling. I went back to my small room in the staff wing, but I didn't sleep. The image of Leo's cold, efficient movements replayed in my head. A twin thing. The phrase was meant to shut me out, to make me feel like an outsider who couldn't possibly understand. But what I had seen didn't feel like protection. It felt like sabotage. The next day I watched them. I watched them like a hawk, and once I was looking for it, I saw it everywhere. It was in the little things. At breakfast, Liam was sketching in his notebook, a rare small smile on his face. Leo, reaching for the orange juice, accidentally knocked his elbow, sending the full glass cascading over Liam's drawing. "Oh man, I'm so sorry, Liam," Leo exclaimed, grabbing a napkin with a great show of panic. But I saw it. For a split second, as their mother scolded Liam for having his messy things at the table, a flicker of pure, unadulterated triumph flashed in Leo's eyes. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by his usual charming concern. Later that afternoon, I was dusting the upstairs hallway when I heard Mr. Ashworth's booming voice from the study. He was on the phone, bragging about Leo's latest football victory. Liam walked past, a library book in his hand, and he flinched at the sound of his brother's name being praised. He looked smaller than ever, a ghost in his own home. Leo came out of his room then and slung an arm around Liam's shoulders. "Don't worry, little brother," he said, his voice loud enough for me to hear. "Maybe one day you'll do something Dad can be proud of too." He ruffled Liam's hair, a gesture that looked friendly but was just a little too rough. Liam didn't respond. He just pulled away and disappeared into his room. That was it. My last shred of doubt vanished. Leo wasn't protecting his brother. He was the source of the problem. He was orchestrating this whole thing, making sure Liam stayed small, stayed weak, stayed in the shadows while he soaked up all the light. The untouched plates weren't a symptom of teenage anxiety. They were a testament to Leo's silent, vicious campaign. I had to do something. I couldn't go to the Ashworths. They worshipped Leo. They would see my accusations as the ramblings of a meddling housekeeper. They would fire me in a heartbeat, and then Liam would have no one. I had to get proof. Something undeniable. But more than that, I had to get food into that boy. That night, I baked. I made a small batch of Liam's absolute favorite childhood treats, gooey chocolate fudge brownies, still warm from the oven. The smell alone was heavenly. I put 2 on a small plate with a tall glass of cold milk, a peace offering to a boy starving in a house full of food. I waited until I was sure everyone was asleep, until the silence of the mansion was at its deepest. It must have been close to 1 in the morning. Holding the tray, my heart pounding against my ribs, I crept down the hallway to Liam's room. His door was usually shut tight, but tonight it was cracked open just a sliver. A faint light spilled into the hall. I paused, holding my breath. I could hear a voice from inside, a low, insistent whisper. It was Leo. I crept closer, my slippered feet making no sound on the thick carpet. I peered through the crack. The sight made the tray in my hands tremble. Liam was sitting on the edge of his bed, huddled in his pajamas, looking utterly terrified. Leo stood over him, not touching him, but his presence was a physical force, pinning his brother in place. He wasn't yelling. He was speaking in a calm, almost hypnotic tone, and his words were colder than any winter night. "We've been over this," Leo whispered, his voice laced with venomous sweetness. "You know the rules. Every bite you eat is food you don't deserve. It's my food. Every bit of strength you gain, you're stealing it directly from me. And I will not let you be stronger than me. Ever." He leaned in closer, his face inches from his twins. "So you will not eat, Liam. You will smile at Clara, and you will tell her you're fine. Because if I find out you've eaten so much as a single crumb, I will take your sketchbook, and I will personally rip every single one of your precious drawings into confetti right in front of your face. Do you understand me?" My blood ran cold. The tray of brownies felt like it weighed 100 pounds. My knuckles were white where I gripped the ceramic plate. This wasn't just sibling rivalry. This was a calculated psychological war being waged against a child, and the perpetrator was his own twin brother. Liam, small and trembling, could only nod, a single tear tracing a path down his hollowed cheek. He didn't make a sound. He looked like a cornered animal, completely broken. Leo straightened up, his face transforming in an instant. The monstrous cruelty vanished, replaced by a patronizing brotherly smile. Good. See? We just need to understand each other. It's for your own good, really. Now get some sleep. You look awful. He patted Liam's head, a gesture of ownership rather than affection, and turned to leave. My body moved before my mind could process the danger. I flattened myself against the wall in the darkened hallway, melting into the shadows of a large, decorative urn. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure he would hear it. Leo walked out of the room, pulling the door almost shut behind him, and headed toward his own bedroom at the end of the hall without a backward glance. I stayed frozen in place, listening to the click of his door, the creak of his bed, and then, finally, the return of that heavy, oppressive silence. I waited for what felt like an eternity, every nerve ending screaming. The milk on the tray was getting warm. The brownies were cooling. Slowly I pushed myself off the wall and crept back to Liam's door. I pushed it open gently. The only light came from his small desk lamp, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. Liam was exactly where Leo had left him, sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at nothing. He hadn't moved a muscle. "Liam," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. He jumped, his head snapping up. His eyes were wide with fear, and for a second, I think he thought Leo had come back. When he saw it was me, some of the terror receded, but it was replaced by a deep, impenetrable wall of shame. He quickly wiped his cheek with the back of his pajama sleeve. I walked over and placed the tray on his nightstand. I made these for you," I said softly. "I thought you might be hungry." He stared at the brownies, his gaze hungry and terrified all at once. His stomach let out a low, mournful growl. He flinched, wrapping his arms around his middle as if to silence it. "I can't," he whispered, his eyes darting toward the closed door. He'll know." "I saw him, Liam," I said, my voice barely a breath. I heard what he said. The shame in his face intensified, and he buried his face in his hands. His thin shoulders started to shake with silent, racking sobs. I sat on the bed beside him, not touching him, just being there. I let him cry. I let all the fear and the misery he'd been holding inside pour out of him in the safety of that dimly lit room. After a few minutes, the sobs subsided into shuddering breaths. "He told me," Liam finally whispered, his voice muffled by his hands, "that when we were born, I was so weak I almost didn't make it. He said I stole his strength in the womb. That's why he's always been bigger, faster. He says I owe him, and that every time I eat, I'm stealing from him again, trying to get stronger than him. And he can't let that happen." The words were so twisted, so monstrous, that I felt a fresh wave of rage wash over me. Leo had been feeding him this poison for years, crafting a narrative where Liam's very existence was a debt he could never repay. He had weaponized their parents' blatant favoritism and turned it into a prison for his brother. "That is not true, Liam," I said firmly, finding a strength I didn't know I had. "That is a cruel, wicked lie. You deserve to eat. You deserve to be strong and healthy. You are not stealing from anyone by living." He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and full of doubt. "But Dad always says Leo is the strong one. Mom says I need to be more like him." "Your parents, they don't see everything, Liam." I picked up the plate of brownies. "But I do. And I know you are starving. You need to eat. Forget Leo. Forget your parents for 1 minute. Let's just get some food in you. Right here. Right now. I won't let him hurt you. I promise." He looked from my face to the brownie, his hand trembling as he reached for it. It was the most heartbreaking sight I had ever witnessed, a child terrified of food. He took a small, hesitant bite. His eyes closed, and a look of pure, unadulterated relief washed over his face. He devoured the first brownie in seconds, then the second. He drank the entire glass of milk without stopping for breath. When he was done, He looked at me, a smear of chocolate at the corner of his mouth, and gave me the first genuine, hopeful smile I had seen from him in months. "Thank you, Clara," he whispered. We had a secret. For the next 2 weeks, my life revolved around feeding Liam. It was a covert operation. I'd sneak food into his room when everyone was out. I'd meet him in the library with a sandwich while he was supposed to be studying. We used my small staff bathroom to dispose of the evidence. Slowly, so slowly, a little bit of color returned to his cheeks. He still picked at his food at the dinner table, playing his part in Leo's sick theater, but now it was an act, and I could see the change. He was a little less tired, a little more present. He started sketching again with a renewed passion. I knew this couldn't last. We were living on borrowed time. Leo was smart. He was observant. He would notice. I needed a plan. I needed undeniable proof to show the Ashworths, something they couldn't possibly ignore or explain away. My phone became my weapon. I started trying to record their interactions, but Leo was careful. He never said anything incriminating when I was around. Then, one evening, I overheard Mrs. Ashworth on the phone, talking to the headmaster of the boys' school. They were planning the annual parent-teacher-student conference for the following week. She mentioned it would be held in the headmaster's office, and that all the twins' teachers would be there. An idea, desperate and dangerous, began to form in my mind. The headmaster's office. I had cleaned it once when I'd helped cater a school event. I remembered seeing a small potted ficus tree on the corner of his bookshelf. It was the perfect hiding spot. The risk was enormous. If I was caught, I wouldn't just be fired. Mrs. Ashworth could make sure I never worked in this town again. But when I looked at Liam, who was quietly reading in the corner, a faint light back in his eyes, I knew I had no choice. I had to expose Leo, no matter the cost. The day of the parent-teacher conference, my stomach was a knot of anxiety. I had called in sick to my evening shift, claiming a migraine, the first time I'd ever missed a day of work. The lie sat heavy on my tongue, but it was a necessary evil. I drove to the school in my old rattling car an hour after the last bell, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I knew the janitor's schedule. I knew he started on the ground floor and worked his way up. I had a 20-minute window. Slipping through a side door I'd propped open earlier with a tiny pebble, I moved through the empty, echoing halls of the prestigious school. The silence here was different from the mansions. It was a peaceful, expectant silence, full of the ghosts of learning and laughter. I found the headmaster's office, the door unlocked as I'd hoped. Inside, it smelled of old books and floor polish. My hands trembled as I took out the tiny audio recorder I'd bought from a spy shop online. It was no bigger than my thumb. I switched it on, tucked it deep into the soil of the ficus tree on the bookshelf, and camouflaged it with a few faux leaves. Then I fled, my conscience screaming at the line I had just crossed. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I went about my duties at the mansion in a daze, jumping at every sound, convinced that police would show up at the door to arrest me for planting a bug in a school. I avoided Leo, whose smug confidence seemed more pronounced than ever. I gave Liam a reassuring nod when no one was looking, and he gave me a small, nervous smile in return. The Ashworths returned from the conference late that evening. Mrs. Ashworth looked irritated. Mr. Ashworth looked bored. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. They went through the motions of dinner, with Mr. Ashworth praising Leo for his glowing reviews and chiding Liam for his lack of engagement. It was as if nothing had happened. My heart sank. Had the recorder failed? Had they not discussed Liam's health at all? My desperate gamble, it seemed, had been a total bust. The following morning, I went to the school before dawn, my stomach churning with dread. I retrieved the recorder, my fingers clumsy with fear. I spent the rest of the morning hiding in my room, headphones on, listening. Most of it was standard school talk. Leo's excellence in sports, his leadership qualities, his stellar grades. Liam's teachers were more hesitant. They praised his artistic talent but noted his withdrawal, his fatigue, his lack of participation. Then the headmaster cleared his throat. Mr. and Mrs. Ashworth, his voice was grave. We also need to discuss Liam's physical well-being. His teachers and the school nurse have all expressed extreme concern. He's lost a significant amount of weight. He often seems lethargic, and frankly, he looks unwell. Have you spoken to a doctor? There was a pause. Then Mrs. Ashworth's sharp voice cut in. He's a teenager. He's picky. We are handling it. I'm afraid it's more than that, the headmaster insisted gently. Perhaps we should ask the boys. Leo, you're his twin. You see him more than anyone. Do you have any idea what's going on with your brother? And then I heard it. Leo's voice smooth as silk, oozing with false concern. I've tried to talk to him, sir. I really have. But he won't listen. He says things. Strange things. What sort of things? Mr. Ashworth asked, his tone suddenly sharp. He says he doesn't deserve to eat, Leo said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He says that being strong is my job, and he needs to stay weak. He told me it's a game he's playing, to see how long he can go. He thinks it's funny. I beg him to eat. I even try to eat his food for him so you and Dad won't get mad. But he just won't stop. My blood turned to ice. He was using the truth, twisting it into a weapon to paint Liam as mentally unstable, as the architect of his own destruction. It was diabolical. It was brilliant. And the Ashworths were buying it. I could hear their murmurs of shock and embarrassment. They weren't horrified for Liam. They were horrified for themselves. Leo had won. He had checkmated us all. I sat there on my bed, shaking with fury. He wasn't going to get away with it. I downloaded the audio file to a cheap, disposable USB stick. I typed out an anonymous letter explaining everything I had seen and heard, including a transcript of the chilling conversation I had overheard in Liam's bedroom. I addressed the package to the headmaster, marked it urgent and confidential regarding Liam Ashworth, and paid a courier to deliver it to the school that very afternoon. The explosion came 2 days later. I was polishing silver in the dining room when Mr. and Mrs. Ashworth stormed in. They had just returned from an emergency meeting at the school. Their faces were pale, their expressions a mixture of fury and utter disbelief. They didn't speak to me. They marched straight upstairs, and I heard them yelling, not at Liam, but at Leo. For the first time, the golden child was feeling the heat of their rage. It turned out the headmaster had listened to the recording. He had called in the school counselor, and together they had spoken to Liam, alone, away from his parents, away from his brother, with the gentle prompting of professionals who had been handed the key to his prison. Liam finally told them everything. The whole, twisted, poisonous story. The Ashworths were forced to see the truth they had refused to acknowledge for years. Their perfect son was a cruel manipulator, and their weak son was a victim of sustained, horrific abuse. The fallout was immediate. Leo was pulled from the school and sent to a therapeutic boarding facility. The Ashworths were mandated to attend family counseling. For the first time, their perfect facade had shattered, and they were forced to look at the ugly reality underneath. I thought I would be fired for my part in it all, but Mrs. Ashworth came to me a week later. She looked older, humbled. She didn't apologize. That wasn't her way, but she thanked me. "You saved him, Clara," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You saw what we refused to see. I stayed on at the mansion. It's quieter now, but it's a different kind of quiet. It's a healing silence. Liam is getting help, both from doctors and therapists. He's slowly gaining weight, but the real change is in his eyes. The fear is gone. He sketches constantly, his drawings full of vibrant color. The other day, I came into the kitchen and found him standing at the counter, a cookbook open, a smear of flour on his nose. He was trying to bake brownies. He looked up at me and smiled, a real, wide, brilliant smile. "Want to help me, Clara?" he asked. And in that moment I knew the shadow had finally been chased away by the light, his own light, and it was stronger than anyone had ever imagined.